But I got to tell you, all cops need a big heart. And Ken realized there is nothing more important than protecting the defenseless, those without a voice. This year, he restored $150 million in elderly Medicaid payments. He restored funding to allow 400 disabled persons to remain with their family as opposed to being sent to a state hospital. He restored money for the continuing operation of the Southeastern Virginia Training Center in Chesapeake, the Commonwealth Center for Children and Adolescents in Staunton, and the Adolescent Unit at the Southwest Virginia Mental Health Institute. I think his dedication to those with no voice was amply illustrated by one of his first acts when he was elected senator. One of his first bills was to provide sewage to some of our poorest communities. It was ironic indeed that in one of the richest cities of the Commonwealth, in 1991, some of our poorer communities were still using outhouses. Ken got to the Senate, and he changed that. Nobody asked him to do it. He just knew it was the right thing to do, and he did it. I have been in law enforcement for 31 years. 24 of those I've spent as a law enforcement executive. It has been my honor to serve as an executive with both the police department and the sheriff's office. I know what it takes to lead a large law enforcement organization. Ken has the unique blend of administrative skills, political understanding, ethical background, leadership needed to be our next sheriff. The Virginia Beach Sheriff's Office is the best in the Commonwealth, and I can tell you that unashamedly in my 3 years as chief deputies. I'm proud to serve here. The legacy of excellence was begun by Frank Drew and was sustained by our current sheriff, Paul Antane. It will continue with Ken at the helm. Ken will improve on what is excellent. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the next sheriff of the city of Virginia Beach, my friend, Ken Stolle.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. I know at 5 o'clock is an unusual time for an announcement. I also want to thank all the deputies that are here and point out that they're here on their own time. And everybody from the Sheriff's Department and any other city agencies are here on their own time. And I very much appreciate them being here to support my candidacy for sheriff. With Paul's retirement, and I did not encourage him to retire. I would have been happy if Paul stayed on for years. But with Paul's retirement, there's going to be a new sheriff in town. And with your help, I'd like to be that new sheriff. 19 years ago, I kicked off my Senate campaign and made a terrible mistake. And I still hear about it today. I forgot to introduce my wife and family, and I will not make that mistake again. So today, I'd like to introduce Debbie, my wife, my daughter Whitney, and Kenny, my son. My other son, Ross, is still at VMI, and we'll bring him home this weekend. 18 years ago, violent crime was going through the roof. The use of crack cocaine was exploding, and we had a criminal justice system that was not only inadequate, but was dishonest as well. I remember a search warrant my SWAT team executed not far from here in 1987. The warrant was for crack cocaine. When we entered the house, they started shooting at us, and one of my officers was struck in the head by a bullet. Fortunately, he had a ballistic helmet on, and the bullet hit the helmet and bounced into the ceiling. The officer was not hurt, but the point of the matter was he was shot by a drug dealer in his official capacity as a police officer. And under Virginia sentencing guidelines at the time, the person that shot him in the head received 10 years and served less than 4 years in the state penitentiary. For me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I realized that we had a good police department, we had a good sheriff's office, we had a good Commonwealth attorney's office, we even had good judges. What we didn't have was the leadership in Richmond to provide the public safety community with the tools they needed to be effective. So I decided to run for the Senate almost entirely on a strong law and order platform. And as I look around, there's many people here today that stood beside me then, and one that hasn't been introduced is Jack DeWan, who was actually the City of Virginia Beach's first jail administrator. Jack, we're happy to have you here tonight. I ran on a strict law and order platform, and for 18 years I fought for and supported law enforcement and public safety in Virginia. I patroned the bills that abolished parole, that established truth in sentencing, that put 3 strikes you're out in place. I fought for tougher penalties for drug dealers. I fought for tougher penalties for sex offenders, tougher penalties for DUI offenders, and tougher penalties for gang-related crimes, and we were successful in passing all of those. And the list goes on and on. As chairman of the Senate Finance Public Safety Subcommittee, I helped provide for the construction, funding, and operation of Virginia's local and regional jails. And for the first time in recent history, we have a balance between the local, regional, and state penitentiary beds. And we're not experiencing severe backups. Paul reminds me when we're experiencing backups in the state and the local facilities. Public safety has done pretty well on my watch in Virginia. We have the lowest crime rate that we've had in 40 years. The law enforcement officers in the community have the tools that they need, and they have better benefits and better retirement. My most proud and most important accomplishment, however, is truth in sentencing. Truth and trust in our criminal justice system is fundamental to being viewed as a fair system. When I first ran for office, the time served by someone convicted had little to do with the time imposed by a jury or a judge. It was a dishonest system, and we changed it. Now our sentencing practices are a model nationally and internationally. I remember when I was running for the Senate the first time, I was over in Lagomar at a coffee, and I was talking about the criminal justice system and how the parole system worked in Virginia. And a woman very politely waited until I was done and came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, but you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. I just served on a jury, and we imposed 20 years on an individual that had committed a rape, and he has to serve all 20 years. And I said, I wish I was wrong, but I'm not wrong. That individual will probably be out in less than 6 years, and they're not allowed to tell the jury about the sentencing guidelines in Virginia, and so they don't get near the sentence that's imposed." As Sheriff Lantain pointed out, my opponent wants to change this. He wants to arbitrarily decide who he thinks should have their sentence, who should serve their sentence, and who should not. Let me be clear about this. My opponent will ignore the sentences imposed by the judge and the jury and will instead impose his own standard on who has to serve their jail time and who does not. This is not truth in sentencing, and it's not something that has happened under the Sheriff Lantain or the Sheriff Strew administration, and it will not happen when I'm sheriff. People say to me, "You're a state senator. Why do you want to be a sheriff?" My answer is I've always been, at least in my heart, I've always been a law enforcement officer first and foremost. I've accomplished the goals that I set out to accomplish when I went to Richmond to serve in the Senate. Now I want to rejoin these men and women in uniform who do so much for our community. There are many challenges facing the Sheriff's Office across the Commonwealth over the next several years: funding, staffing, and security issues. The answer to these challenges require not only law enforcement experience, but also a knowledge of how local and state governments can work together to solve these problems. We need a sheriff with the experience and the knowledge to take advantage of all of these resources to provide the citizens of Virginia Beach the most effective and efficient jail possible. My good friend Paul is retiring after 35 years in law enforcement in the community. I don't know that I'd wish that on anybody. My good friends Chief Free and Chief Schuster have encouraged me to run. I've received overwhelming support from the members of the Sheriff's Office, community leaders, public safety leaders, at home and around the state, and most importantly, the citizens of our great city. It's the best run office in the state with the best deputies and the best staff. How could I say no? It's like a dream come true, and with your help, this dream will become a reality. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Let the campaign begin.